Hello, everyone. It's 11:30 here Eastern Standard Time on the West Coast, and I'm not sure what time it is. We've got people apparently from many parts of the world here. So, welcome. I'm Bill Visnick. I'm the editorial director of mobility media at SAE International. Today, we're going to be speaking with Mike Ramsey, who's the vice president analyst, Gartner Research, discussing the impact of emerging automotive technology, and in particular, their annual hype cycle of what's going on really with automotive technology all across the sector. Gartner is a leading research and advisory company in automotive. They've expanded beyond their flagship technology research to provide senior leaders across the enterprise with the indispensable business insights, advice, and tools they need to achieve their mission critical priorities and build the organization of tomorrow. Uh, Together, we've partnered with the SAE Detroit section, and thank you everyone there at the Detroit section for having me and Mike and putting on this event today, including Stephanie White, who's been immensely patient with both of us for that. So thank you to the Detroit section. Throughout the conversation today, please feel free to use the chat box that you'll see at the bottom of your screen if you want to ask a question. And we'll sort of deal with those, I think, as they come in, if they're relevant to what we're talking about right there. And we'll probably hit some of those more towards the end of the session as well. So with that, I'm going to welcome Mike into the discussion today. And Mike, happy that you're here with us. Let's get into it.
All right. Thanks a lot, Bill. And thanks to the SAE for inviting me to participate in this. And just to kind of amplify on what Bill said before we jump in, Gartner is probably, really well known in the IT community, but our mission over time has changed, and we really are more like a technology research and advisory firm. And I'm based here in Detroit and have been around the auto industry for many years, and prior to joining Gartner about 4.5 years ago, I was at the Wall Street Journal covering the auto industry and other places before that. So it's great to have you on, and
Okay. So Mike, give us a little bit of a history of the hype cycle here and
yeah.
help me with this too, because I've been familiar with it as a working journalist for a long time. I've been familiar with it. Hype is one of those charged words, right? Like propaganda, that doesn't necessarily have a positive connotation for everybody. So, kind of walk everyone through how you came up with this, what the history is, and why hype and talking about hype isn't a bad thing when you say hype.
Yeah. Well, the hype cycle has been around for a long time, and there's even there's a book out there that you can read on on the hype cycle and its creation. But it is effectively it really came out in the 1990s when we were in the beginning of I'll call it IT revolution. Prior to the 1990s, IT was not in reality didn't exist, not in the way that it does now. So this information technology started to come along, and what happened is and I'm blanking on the guy's name, but at Gartner there was one of our researchers came up with this idea that expectations about a technology usually are far higher early on than its actual implementation and usefulness.
Right.
Okay, so that over time, that it follows this kind of predictable way of passing through both. I would say, it is of course media attention, but it's also how people in a specific industry view it. And it initially was very heavily focused on individual technologies, and then we actually started to bring in more concepts. So, you could say something like Industry 4.0, which is a hot thing in manufacturing, is not a technology, but it's a concept that certainly has been hyped And the reality of it is that it hasn't been implemented at nearly the sort of level that it's been hyped. So the value of it, I guess, and then I'll kind of maybe walk through what each of these things mean. But the value of it is twofold. One, it's a good chart to show you what are the technologies that are important right now. And the other value is to kind of give an idea about, you can do some expectation that if a technology is at the peak of hype, that its actual applicability inside the industry, how much is it being used, is probably not very high, and
In
you
terms of
don't,
commercialization, you mean?
in terms of commercialization, it
Yeah.
doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. I mean, but certainly it's not very high. So when someone said something's at peak hype, and often I would say that people have, I want to say hijacked it, but they use that term probably
Right.
without even knowing that it's related to the Gartner hype cycle, which is fine,
Mhm.
but what they mean is they're trying to convey this idea that the hype is way beyond the reality. And it,
Right.
yeah, and it's easiest to see in the big technologies like autonomous vehicles or 5G, and harder to see maybe in some of these smaller ones that are more industry specific.
Yeah, I think there's nuance here, because you have to consider, I think, the prism through which someone's seeing it. Like you say, the media, I think, has a way to deal with, with technology and talking about technology. And then people in our industry, in the automotive industry, are looking at it from a prism that maybe is not necessarily the same, because they have a commercialization sort of a orientation, I think, at least anyway. And they're saying, well, we know that's in development, maybe at my company, company X, but we know it's still 3 years out or whatever, right? So there's different sort of ways to come at this, I think.
Yeah, and also I would like to give a disclaimer whenever people have issues with where something is on the cycle. It's a model, it's not perfect, right? We're not always going to be absolutely right. We don't know, there is no way to determine with precision when something is at peak hype. And you also, there are rules that we have for putting technologies on here. A technology can't move backwards, okay? So it has to move forward. We can determine that it doesn't move very much forward, but if you have technologies that have sort of second comings, where
Right.
there was, then you can find on the hype cycle these things that look anomalous, but this might be a good time to talk about what does all this mean. Like, I'll try to quickly run through what the stages mean. So the
Yeah, get
innovation,
through those stages, Mike. I
yeah,
think people will be interested to know, what exactly do you mean when you say trough of disillusionment? That
yeah.
sounds almost like a magic trick or something, right? And now I'll show you the trough of disillusionment. So,
It reminds me of like the Browns fans, the factory of sadness is what they call that. But
right,
okay, so the five stages are the innovation trigger, which is basically when something becomes first known, right? So like when we first kind of introduce this idea or technology, usually if it's written about in media, it's usually only in very technical media, not mainstream media.
right.
Um, the peak of inflated expectations is pretty clear. I think most people understand, but when we have guidelines, it's mostly positive and large scale media attention, a significant expansion of entrants. So you see a lot of companies that are now coming into this space trying to take advantage of it.
Okay.
Okay. Often that's followed with a lot of investment, right? So whether that's venture capital or corporate investment, and specifically, obviously in a peak of hype, there's a lot of expectation that this technology is going to have a lot of impact, right?
Promise, right?
A
Yeah.
lot of promise, okay? Um, that's great. That's it, and it's totally necessary to have this if you're going to get anything done. After all these people come into the space, and all this investment is made, now we have a lot of people playing musical chairs, right? And not a lot of seats. Usually the market is not big enough to support all the entrants, and and the technology is not ready typically for commercialization. So then when you fall into the trough of disillusionment, what's happening is it's usually followed by a turn in negative news attention, like something's gone wrong. It doesn't really turn out the way that we thought. The expectations are starting to be
Maybe it
diminished.
just went slower than everyone expected, right?
It went slower than everyone expected is probably the number one thing, right? I usually use autonomous vehicles is a good one, but I actually use 3D printing often as a good
Great
example of this, because 3D printing was at the peak of hype in 2013, I think that's right. And then I don't know if many probably will remember, Stratasys and 3DS, their stock prices were super high. Everyone's like, oh my God, 3D printing is going to wipe out manufacturing. Everything's going to be thrown up in the air. Well, guess what? Everyone's like, I can't figure out what to do with it, right? Like the stock prices crashed.
Well,
but
the technical understanding of what they were able to do in certain industries started to really become mature, and everyone began to realize, oh, okay, this isn't a panacea. We're not going to be able to knock out car bodies with 3D printing, right? So, it kind of
right. So it basically what happens is then it falls to the trough, and now where is 3D printing on? It's not on this chart, because someone's asking in the chat. I'll jump on this.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
This is hype cycle for connected vehicles and smart mobility. This does not include every technology that is relevant to the auto industry. They try to keep us to under 25. We would have 2,000 on here if we put in every technology. There are other hype cycles. There's an automotive electronics hype cycle that has a lot more specific technologies like fuel cells. There is a trucking one, a logistics one that has autonomous trucking, because that was a question on here. So just so you know, we can't put them all on this hype cycle. It would just be like a series of overlapping dots. So this one is more related to connected vehicles and smart mobility. And we decide, like, I'm the author of this hype cycle, so I get to pick what's on there. So it's a authoritarian decree, of what I decide that I'm going to put on the hype cycle. But the individual technologies that are on here are written by different analysts all over the company. And the technologies that are on this hype cycle are not connected to the hype cycle, okay? They are independent of it and can appear on 50 different hype cycles, of which there are about that many inside the total company across many different industry segments. So if data marketplaces and exchanges, for example, on here, that is not specific to this hype cycle, right? It's on a half dozen other hype cycles. Flying autonomous vehicles, same thing. So
it's very sector specific then, and you sort of generate really what the population is here, right? So you decided what's here, what belongs here, and what doesn't.
Right, and virtual assistants is a good one too. Virtual assistants appear all over the place in probably half a dozen different hype cycles in different industries, and that's where they appear in here. So
okay,
as you move through
the slope of enlightenment, Mike, let's go back to that for a second.
Yeah.
We've talked about the trough now, not talk about the slope of enlightenment phase here.
The slope of enlightenment is basically, and here 3D printing is in the slope of enlightenment, okay? Why? It's way below the peak of hype in 2013 in terms of people don't talk about it, but if you look around the manufacturing industry, a lot of interesting things are going on with 3D printing. It's being implemented a lot. People have figured out where to put it, where it fits. They're getting a better idea about it, right? And now they're going to start to, once we get to the plateau of productivity, it will never be as hyped as it was before, but all of a sudden it will be utilized at a much greater level. And I don't have this data here, but one of the areas that our CIO survey showed in terms of investment across the auto industry is 3D printing was pretty widespread across auto companies in terms of planned investment and implementation.
Okay. Good. And folks, before anybody gets too panicked, we're going to go back and talk about several of these individual places on the individual technologies on the hype cycle, and we'll discuss those, because I think that's probably the thing everybody wants to kind of discuss and argue about here. Really is, if something belongs here, why is it on this part then as opposed to another part of the hype cycle? So we will definitely be talking about individual technologies in just a minute. And then, Mike, I think the final phase, plateau production, talk about that, but I think that's fairly explanatory there, right?
Yeah, and basically, we even have a market definition that 20% or more of the technology is utilized by 20% of the market or more. So, that definition is a little bit difficult to pin down because some things are a little bit difficult to characterize. But it, generally speaking, if you look at connected car platforms, they are basically almost in plateau productivity. Every car company is using one. They're maturing. They're becoming a little bit more solidified. And in a few years, this will be off the hype cycle altogether. We won't track it anymore.
So at what point would we sort of use the term mainstream there then here? Would it?
That would be it, basically. A mainstream technology would be in the plateau of productivity, but we decide at some point to just take it off. So if it's commonplace, like if I had technology on here, like, one of the technologies that is no longer on here is Bluetooth, or is mobile phone connection to a car, right? I mean, it's not on here because every single car produced has that, right? And has for a long time. It's totally mature. It's in 100% of vehicles. Yeah, basically, right? Okay.
Well, this is all, I think as the viewers start to absorb this, I think it's all quite fascinating, really, to try to place this in terms of, what we see in the auto industry and what our own experience has told us, right, as of how a lot of these technologies are sort of gyrating through their generations and through their adoption curves, I guess, if you want to use that term. So, I thought when we spoke beforehand, Mike, we thought it would be interesting to maybe pick a technology or two on each part of the hype cycle here and talk about it a little bit and have some discussion about these individual technologies, why they are maybe where they are on the hype cycle, and then we'll see where it goes from there. Okay. So, on the innovation trigger side here, we've got a couple, flying autonomous vehicles always gets everyone laughing a little bit.
Right.
There's always some amount of derision involved with that. But we know for a fact that there are, serious, automakers and suppliers, throwing a decent amount of investment, at the potential for, flying autonomous vehicles. In terms of shared mobility, in terms of mobility as a service, right? So, but yet at the same time, I think everyone agrees, well, we know there aren't a lot of there isn't anything like this really going on right now. So it's a good place, I think, to have this particular technology on the curve. But digital personalization has moved just a little bit past it, is in the peak of inflated expectations. So talk about that one a little bit, Mike.
Yeah, digital personalization, just to kind of give a definition here, what this is about is, and you probably in the industry would know about instances where car companies are trying hard to figure out how to create platforms that are connected to consumers so that the vehicle automatically has settings related to the particular driver and is able to keep these driver profiles and customize vehicles, even if you don't own them. So like if you were in a shared vehicle, or if you were in like even a rental vehicle, it would automatically know that's Mike Ramsey. I'm going to change all the radio settings. I'm going to change all the, subscriptions that he's already got, or I'm going to, we've already have cars now that say, oh, put in, press the button, it sets your seat, it sets your radio preferences. This is something that is being done in some ways, but digital personalization is a broader concept around the idea that a cloud platform could be used to change the in-vehicle experience specific to me, right? And have that mobile, right? So I could move it from car to car.
Well, Mike, I know a lot of people are worried, or I guess worry is the right term to use for this anyway, that some of this stuff does start to leak into the, the area of privacy concern and what's going into the cloud, what's really being shared with who. There's already a lot of discussion really in many different parts of the automotive sector, even about some of the in-vehicle cameras that are, that would be a big technology that would be a part of digital personalization, because you have facial recognition, concerns. Who's got that information? What are they doing with it? Do you think the industry is going to be able to sort of allay the fears of people about about their privacy?
There have been some studies that have been done about privacy and data sharing, and the short version is that people have some privacy concerns, but they're more what they really want is less hassle. They want more convenience. Well, they want things to work, and they're willing to give up privacy in exchange for something, right? It's got to work, and they don't want irritation. So I think that this is an interest. I am positive that there will be a portion of people who are horrified by the idea of a camera watching them and don't want that. However, to flip this around, in China, there's a connected vehicle platform by a joint venture called Banma that one of the features it has is a selfie capability with internal facing camera, so that it'll allow you to take a picture of yourself with the internal facing camera and an external camera at the same time. So like, what's your face look as you're looking out at the Three River Gorges, right? Or to me, this is a perfect example of, is that a privacy violation, or is that a super cool consumer feature that I'll pay extra money for?
Right. Well, and the key there is you use the word feature, and I think that's something that maybe throughout this whole discussion, we'll probably see a little bit more of, what is a feature compared to what is a technology really, let's say like LiDAR or something, right? So I think, it's going to be interesting to see how people and like you say, what they are willing to give up or what they're willing to accede to get a feature, right? To get a convenience, to get something that they think is worthwhile to them, in terms of, making their lives easier or making the in-car experience easier. And those kind of technologies sometimes tend to be more important to people, Mike, I think, than like ABS or something, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Well,
okay.
I mean, the ongoing, because I work a lot with connected vehicle type of technologies. The ongoing problem has been over time, how do you get people to pay for connectivity, to pay for these services? General Motors, God love them, have done an amazing job trying to create a really good platform, and I do think that OnStar is the best system out there in terms of its full featured capability and customer service and all that. That said, they still struggle to get people to pay additional money, and one of the reasons, the big reasons, is this thing came along and it just keeps adding capability faster and faster and faster and faster, and So the car companies are now really in this position of trying to figure out how to differentiate enough,
Yeah,
from the
monetize
phone.
features really. Yeah, to monetize features. I mean, we saw the same thing happen essentially with onboard GPS, right? Where, at one time, I remember it well. There were car companies that were getting $1,000 or more for an onboard GPS system,
Totally.
and now you pick up your cell phone and you've got it right there for free, basically.
Yeah.
So, this whole digital personalization thing, I think, is going to be fascinating to watch roll out. Just in the interest of time,
Yep.
we'll move on. But in the meantime, again, folks, to the viewers out there, I'll remind you, use the chat box if you want to jump into this somewhere. We're more than willing to, to bring in your questions or your insights or your ideas and bring it into the conversation. So use your chat box if you'd like to, to pop a specific question right now to Mike, and we'll do that. Mike, we're going to move on here to 5G, which is now right there in sort of the edge of the phase of peak of inflated expectations. And look, if you're like anybody, if you've been watching sports on TV at all lately, now that they're back, you've been deluged with advertisements about 5G, right? So okay, tell us what's going on there as far as you see it.
Yeah, my view from the client side, when I talk to clients about this, is that there's a lot of questions that come in about 5G and its applicability in automotive. And the interesting thing is that we just, as an industry, started putting 4G modems and SIM
Right.
cards into vehicles, right? Now, if you look at the timeline that it's taken to get to this point, to switch over to another generation from where we're at now, let's be realistic. We are going to start to see some 5G antennas in cars starting next year, even in China. And then in 2022, 2023, it'll start picking up. Ford's made some commitments there. The reality is that 5G is not likely to have any significant impact on the auto industry for another, probably mid-decade, right? Like 2025.
Wow. I think folks are going to be fascinated to hear that opinion, Mike. I mean, with everything that they're telling us, and we've got a slide here that sort of shows, what AT&T has promoted in terms of the goodness of 5G. Much better latency. 1/10 the latency now. We're told that cellular signal is going to be important now to potential vehicle to everything communications, all that sort of thing. So we see a lot of advantages here in what the industry is saying about 5G, but you think it's going to be some number of years really before automotive has got this to some level of ubiquity then, huh?
Well, I mean, it has to be, you have to have it in cars, right? I mean, the installed base is going to slowly move to being connected. And then it's going to take a number of years to have any vehicles on the road that have 5G antennas on them at all, right? So the 5G infrastructure also, even though it might exist a little bit now, is very limited. It needs to be built out. The other thing with 5G is if it has different capabilities, right? There's 3 different major capabilities in 5G. It's either a giant data pipe. So if you want to move a giant data pipe, or I want to talk to a million different endpoints at the same time, right? Which is a different capability set from the giant data pipe, or I want incredibly low latency. And in the auto industry, a lot of the safety use cases obviously are built into super low latency, right? But the entertainment and some of the other features that are being proposed are more in the giant data pipe. And not so many of the massive number of endpoints, but you can't necessarily, not all those same use cases require the same kind of infrastructure in different environments. So I think it'll be a bit messy for a while. The other thing about 5G, I think, is we don't know for sure. Just like when we went from 3G to 4G, everyone said it's going to be really awesome. but we didn't know what it meant, right? It was kind of, and then what it turned out, what it meant was all of a sudden everybody started consuming video on their phone. Whereas before
Right.
they didn't. I mean, but that was like a huge transition over to the phone as a device. And I think that from 4G to 5G in the car, it will be interesting. I'm not sure, even though 5G AA, which is the association, the Automotive Association for 5G, has an amazing use case list. I'm not totally sure that we know exactly how 5G will be best utilized in the auto industry.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, apart from some of the discussion about what it may or may not bring to automated driving functionalities, right? You know, in terms of talking to the cloud, doing this sort of thing, the data exchanges that obviously low latency, like you said, is going to be a big deal. I agree. I think there's still going to need to be demonstrated in the industry, in the auto industry. What can this do for me as a user of the automobile? What can the industry do with it? And again, I'll go back to that, that example of the cell phone that you used. With a lot of these things already available to us through the phone. Maybe people see that as good enough right now, and I don't need the vehicle to be my interface, if you will, with my cellular signal, right? I can do it with my phone.
Yeah. I think and let's just point out one other aspect to that. Your phone is almost certainly going to have 5G capability before your car.
Right. Right.
And so now it's going to, it's going to create another lever between, do I really need to have my car do this if my phone is getting 5G service and I can still connect into my car? And you see the cloud giants like Amazon, I don't know if you probably don't know this, but if you leave your app open, your Alexa app on your phone, you can use it in your car. You don't need an Echo Dot. You don't need the app you don't need an app on your screen. You can just like leave it open on your car and just say Alexa, and it will do a lot of the stuff that you would like to have it do. Now, as speeds get faster, and then all of a sudden it just keeps continuing to put pressure on the car companies, ability to
be a device, really, right?
Yes.
To be a device.
There's a question that I think is interesting, is that OEMs struggling to implement data plans. I mean, here's my take on this, which is very definitive, and I've told every automaker that talked to me, they are, and Ford's already gone down this path. I think they're very smart. GM too. There's going to have to be a free tier of data plan. I mean, like, they are going to have to get over. They cannot. They must not charge for some capabilities. They've just got to be free.
Right. I'm not going to pay a subscription for every bit of data that comes into the car, and particularly when a lot of that really is being leveraged for revenue for somebody, right?
Exactly.
Sorry, but I'm not going to pay for that. Okay, so we'll wrap it up on 5G by saying, and if I think I understand you right, it's going to be a while before anybody's necessarily saying, I'm not buying a new car if it's not 5G equipped, right? Just not going to do that. So
I think it could have there are yes, and there are a few things that could rapidly increase 5G, like if there was a government mandate for cellular V2X, that could change the timeline. Right. I'm not saying that's and Qualcomm has definitely made some efforts to essentially package in with their chip, like at no extra cost, the capability to turn on cellular V2X. So they've done some things like that. So it could be something that could happen more quickly. We'll see.
Yeah. Okay, good. Folks, so we'll jump back to the hype cycle here now for a minute to move to the next technology that we're going to talk about. And these are now all in the trough of disillusionment, which, again, if you remember what Mike said at the beginning here, is not necessarily a bad thing. It's just that everybody now is discovering the reality almost, right, of a technology, of a, you know, of a certain kind of an impact that some of these technologies may or may not have. So we've picked one here to talk about micromobility. You know, this one, Mike, was hot before the pandemic. You know, everybody was talking about, you know, Lime and Bird scooters and, you know, wow, what, you know, all the societal impact, I guess, if you will, you know, of you know, how these things were changing the urban landscape, right? You know, then the pandemic hits and bang, nobody wants anything shared now. So, you know, what do you think? Where is micromobility? If you had to do this curve, you know, and restructure the hype curve right now, where would you have micromobility, and what do you think about that?
I am, despite the pandemic, I am actually very bullish on micromobility. And one of the reasons I am is because of some changes that are mostly happening at the city level. I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but what we've seen on an international level is that federal and national governments have been pretty ineffective at you know, putting through transportation policy, and even state and, you know, governments have been pretty ineffective. But who have been very effective is cities. Okay, cities are less politicized. They are much more close to the end user. And so not so much in the United States, although there are some examples, but in other parts of the world, you've seen cities start to be very active in saying no cars here anymore. We're just like shutting off areas of the city. The other thing that they're doing is that cities are being very active in putting in transportation platforms or considering them, meaning I am having a city platform that organizes payment and reservation and travel across different things, whether it's e-bikes or trains or buses. In Beijing, you can get a card and literally get on anything, like anything in the city. So sometimes I think we look through the US focus a bit much. I think that micromobility has a lot of promise because cities are going to take more and more aggressive action to block off areas of the city from cars or limit cars.
That was going on before the pandemic. You know, I mean, you know, you've got congestion measures in many cities in Europe now, even some starting in the United States, where they're just trying to do something about the untenable degree of congestion now in the cities that
totally,
you know, in the mega cities in particular, where it's just gridlock all the time. And, you know, that's why I popped up this shot of the Volkswagen Cargo e-bike, because, you know, Volkswagen was suggesting that, you know, here's something that would make sense in an environment that you're talking about, in an urban area.
I'll give you an example, and I can't name names, but I have, you know, I worked with a company that was working in they're a major global consumer packaged goods company. Okay, so meaning like they're delivering everything from food to soap, you know, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And they wanted to put in a system using something like what you're showing on the screen in Mumbai to do delivery to the little stores all throughout the city, right? They have legions of people who deliver, you know, the snacks, the soap, the stuff that fills shops in a giant congested city. And they're looking at technology platforms to do routing, but not for cars, but for this. Like, how do you do it best when the person is driving a little electric bike? And how can they quickly get through between? So they're already, you know, these big companies are already thinking this is a better solution. This is way faster than trying to get in a car in Mumbai.
Yeah,
you know, especially for trying to get
advantages are clear. You know, I think.
Yeah, totally.
You know, that you've got an ability now to, if you shrink your, you know, if you shrink your footprint of what you're trying to move around in these congested areas, then chances are your mobility in general is going to be better, right? And going to be improved. And, you know, so, okay, just real quick then, though, what do you think this means for a shared micro-mobility, Mike,
Yeah.
like Lime and Bird? Are they going to come back after the pandemic, assuming that the pandemic does get kind of solved at some point fairly soon?
Well, I think you'll see a big consolidation. I mean, there's no
Right.
doubt. I mean,
Right.
there were so many, but that's what happens in the trough of disillusionment, right? You take out a lot of players.
Mhm.
The survivors refine their business model. You know, some of the things that have happened in micromobility with Bird and Lime is they're coming out with new scooters that last longer. That was one of the big flaws.
Yeah, right.
Their scooters
Right.
so they're more durable. There's going to have to be a solution for all these companies for charging. I don't know that they're right now the free floating without any charging docks or anything like that is going to be sustainable. But I think you'll see a number of these companies go out of business. And then the remaining companies will get strengthened. They may end up being acquired,
Yeah.
by other transportation platforms. That's already occurred a little bit. But yeah, I suspect it's here to stay. I also think that there's a good chance that we'll see an expansion of personal ownership of scooters. You've already seen with e-bikes, right? I
Right.
mean,
Right.
so
Yeah.
right now it's shared micromobility has been dominant. I would be very surprised if we don't see an increase in, personal asset ownership.
Personal, right. Particularly if they can get some of these things to I know that both of the big scooter companies were very strongly underway with price reduction across the whole platform, whether it was the scooter itself, the app and everything that it took to sort of behind the scenes to make it all happen. And so they've been really working to reduce the price of all that stuff. Whether that means an individual now goes out and buys an electric scooter, I think, to avoid having to, count on picking one up off the sidewalk somewhere, or not. I think that's going to be interesting to watch evolve. Okay. Mike, I'm going to move on
Yeah.
to one that I think really is kind of top of mind for most people now, and we're starting to work through the real beef of the trough of disillusionment here for these technologies. Well, we're going to talk about autonomous vehicles, and okay, let's just go ahead and get into that now. You're kind of right in the fat part of the hype cycle here,
Yeah.
so what's going on there?
Well, also, I just, as a note, with so many technologies at the bottom of the trough, that's actually a really good sign that in 4 or 5 years,
Okay.
you're going to see a lot of change in the auto industry, right? Like there's a lot of these technologies that we anticipate will start to have a big impact in mid-decade. Well,
Yeah.
we'll see if we're right. But on autonomous vehicles, I mean, there was a question earlier, how do I differentiate? This is the general technology. I'd say that we do have an autonomous trucking innovation profile, which is on a different hype cycle. It is probably going to make it through the cycle faster because this one was
Right.
this original AV profile. The way if you go look it up in the hype cycle, which by the way is a 75-page document. It's not just this cycle, or it's not just this graphic. It encompasses mostly robo-taxis and not so much like package delivery and so think personally owned autonomous vehicles or commercially owned robo-taxis is what we're talking about here. And it's in the trough of disillusionment. I think everyone on this call would recognize that there's been a major pullback in the hype. Public statements from everybody, investment has not quite kept pace with all the companies. You've seen consolidation and partnerships and on and on and on.
Well, the landscape is definitely, I think, compacting itself at least
Totally.
now. And I've put up your. This is a slide of your forecast here for through 2023, and we've got some numbers there, and it's always fun to just kick around the numbers a little bit, and we're looking at this, and you're saying, well, we're somewhere around, it looks like upwards of 700,000, by 2023.
But I got to be very careful with when you look at this chart, okay? Because it'll cause people to have heart palpitations.
Well, that's why we've got it up there, right? Right.
Yeah, let me just explain it. That little light blue number down at the bottom is probably what most people think of as fully autonomous vehicles.
Yeah.
This forecast was created. You have to remember, this forecast was created to serve also people who are selling chipsets and cameras and other things. And when we say autonomous forecast for level 3 capable and above, we have a classification of computer chipsets, very powerful chipsets like from NVIDIA and Intel and others, as well as that we feel like are capable of producing a level 3 vehicle. That doesn't mean that they actually are level 3 vehicles by this organization's definition. So if we say, look at what Tesla has put in their vehicles, the computer chipset is likely more powerful enough to execute it, but whether they can actually execute it is up for debate. And I don't want to get in that debate. So I would concentrate on
all day on that one.
Yeah, I would concentrate on the light blue number is basically the combination of companies that have put in their vehicle, mostly Tesla, honestly, very powerful chipsets. And that's how we do it. The light blue, or I mean the dark blue, the light blue is what we think of as the Waymos and the Cruises and others at the bottom there. And if you look at that number, 2023, I don't know at the top of my head, but it's like 50,000 or something.
Well, yeah, and yeah, I think here, again, you get into so many degrees of nuance now when you start to talk about autonomy, Mike, and whether you're, level 3, just so most people, we get them, level set here on levels, level set on levels. Level 3 is really you've got some degree of you're given the computer some degree of steering control. There's a limited environment in which your vehicle will drive itself, essentially autonomy, but it's very well-defined, specific areas, and either areas or up to a certain speed, something like that. That's a limitation. It is not just flip a switch and go, sort of like Tesla would lead you to believe, right, when they say full self-driving. But there is a lot of nuance here, and I didn't want to necessarily incite a riot or anything.
Right? No, it's good
showing these numbers. But it does. I think the point here is that you've got where you have this on the hype cycle is important, because it is, everyone agrees now it's happening and it's maturing, right?
Mm-hmm. For sure. I mean, I have no doubt that we will have. Waymo just literally has launched a robo-taxi service. So I mean, it's already done. I mean, this was written, the end of last year. So, I think it's definitely coming. I did want to answer a couple. There's a couple questions related to EVs, and I know I want to make sure I can answer them because we don't have a ton of time left. And
we're moving to these next, so let's just
jump on there. Okay, so we don't have plug-in hybrids on here. I do, it's just a decision. My view on plug-in hybrids is that it is a fantastic technology. It has not been able to grab on because I think that it is squashed between the cost,
really
capability,
vehicles and EVs.
It is a challenging. I mean, from a pragmatic standpoint, the Chevy Volt was one of the most important, interesting vehicles produced ever. I think.
Yeah.
However, it struggled on a bunch of. I mean, it was expensive to build for the size it was, and you can make arguments whether they should have done an SUV.
Yeah.
I don't disagree with any of that stuff. That said, I think that plug-in hybrids may end up being just, squashed out of existence by the rise of electric vehicles. That's my take, But
I'd agree with
you
you,
know,
Mike. I think that there has always been a certain sort of difficulty in translating and to the customer what a plug-in hybrid really is about, why you would want one. Look, I still have people all the time that it's clear they don't really even understand a conventional hybrid, right?
right,
They really just don't get that. And so now you take it to another level of narrowness by saying, well, it's a plug-in hybrid. Well, in some ways that just kind of confused the issue even more, I think, for people who may have been considering, they like in general know that a hybrid's a good thing to have. It saves gas, whatever, but they have really no idea, what it's really, what it's all about from a technical standpoint. And now you try to add on that new layer of plug-in, and it's been tough to translate, I think.
I'll tell you, it could have a resurgence down the road. I mean, as we move to like basically EVs, everything, or if there's a regulation that says it's got to be an EV, like in California, maybe there will be some dispensation says, okay, that counts as an EV.
Yeah,
So
right.
I don't want to say for sure. The way it stands now, it's been a tough sell. I'm very curious to see how Ford does with their Escape, and there are cars out there that are interesting for sure. I just think that they struggle to grab hold. As in terms of just quickly to answer the question about EVs in 5 to 10 years, the reason it's that set up that way is because of just 20% market share. If you look at plateau productivity, until we get to 20% market share of new vehicle sales with EVs, I'd say it's 5 to 10 years.
Yeah,
I mean, we're at
I'd agree.
2%. We're at 2% now. If we get to 20% in 5 years, that'll be like incredible.
I think so too. Even though there are a lot of launches coming up, and I think do we have a slide here on? We talked about autonomy. Here's your EV sales slide. As a matter of fact, Mike. Again, this is Gartner's
Yeah.
Data. And we see here there are a lot of launches, and we know that there are going to be a lot of electric vehicles in the market. I do still think there's going to be a hump to get over in convincing people that they can replace a conventional car with an EV, right? That they're not somehow or another buying an inherently limited thing.
Yep. I mean, what we basically are telling people is that North America is not going to be, in the next several years, unless something changes dramatically, it's not going to be the big driver of EV sales.
Yeah.
Europe is
Yeah.
for sure going to be pushing, unless something changes there, is going to be a big motivator in new EV sales, and China continues on, right? I mean, I don't think it's a big change, but so much of China's sales have been driven by incredible incentives. And I mean, depending on the part of the country you're in, it's like crazy to not buy electric vehicles, and they still aren't making up a huge percentage of the sales, right? So
even with regulatory pressures as well,
right,
which mix in, you still really have to get down to the, in the trenches with consumers and tell them why, they're not going to be giving anything up if they buy an EV, I think.
If you could look at markets where EVs have done exceptionally well, like Norway, if you look at the incentives there and the disincentives,
it's insane.
It's crazy that it's not 100% of the sales.
Yeah.
Right. It's still 50% roughly or whatever of sales in Norway. It should be 100%.
Yeah.
It's
you're really punished there, and for buying a conventional IC vehicle, you're getting punished effectively. They're openly punishing you. So anyway, and we'll couple this up here. We've got a shot here of a one of the early market EVs here in the States, the Jaguar I-Pace, which I think was a fantastic vehicle, but has had trouble getting traction, right? Even in a premium market where presumably those buyers were more receptive. And we're charging up here, and that's was sort of the other side of the coin we wanted to hit real quick here, Mike, in terms of where EV charging, recharging is on the hype cycle, which is somewhere right around with EVs. And I think pretty much you're going to say this is the same problem, right? Is we just don't have enough of it yet.
Yeah, I think fast charging is the next big. I mean, if most of us know 10 years ago there was big proliferation of level 2 charging. A lot of cities tried to take it on.
Right.
I think that what people have realized is that doesn't. I don't want to say it's worthless, but it's not how people use their vehicles. They mostly charge at home, or they're going long distance and they need to recharge a lot fast. So fast charging is going to be the requirement for. If you look at the 3 big obstacles, range, recharging time, and recharging locations, it's for sure a problem that we don't, the recharging time and locations, those need to be addressed. Yeah, so I think that that's going to be one of the things that it is happening. Yeah, and that once it gets in place, we will see a bigger uptick.
I think, right. People have to see these things. They have to know what they are and see them all over the place, I think, before, you're really going to see a mindset change, at least anyway. And, in terms of like, oh, I can go out and, like you say, if you have to drive across the country or a long distance, I'm not going to be, have anxiety about, whether I'm going to get there and how long it's going to take. Right.
For sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry, I've got to flip through the slides here to get back to the hype cycle, but the limitations of my own platform here dictate that. We are now over, we talked about autonomous vehicles, electric vehicle charging and infrastructure, and electric vehicles themselves. And so we're really got those all somewhere again here in the meat of the curve, I think, Mike. And these are all things that I think it's very obvious to most people. These are happening. The industry is making them happen. And, now I think it's just, the question mostly is, where do you start to move these off of the hype cycle completely? When would electric vehicles move off, do you think, let's say,
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, and without getting too deep into our way we do it, but every one of these technologies is written by an author or two that are, I don't write them, someone else writes them. So, and then they're peer reviewed. So how fast it moves is kind of up to the person who's responsible for paying attention to that particular technology. I think, generally speaking, EVs will be probably totally off this hype cycle, in the next 6 or 7 years.
Okay.
Right. It will be not worth talking about anymore because it will be common enough. And just to quickly ask a question about Tesla, I mean, the reality is Tesla is half of the EV market, right? I mean, and they're probably going to be even bigger part. I don't see. My view is that Tesla, until people talk about Tesla killers all day long, it's bull crap. No one's killing Tesla. No one's going to outsell Tesla in their market until they have a demonstrably better product, better range, better technology features, have somehow a better cachet. There are very cool electric vehicles that are coming out. Polestar has some cool stuff, but range nowhere close to what you would get in a Tesla. Price still pretty expensive. You're not going to have the over-the-air update kind of capability, and it puts people in a very difficult situation where they say, well, I just don't want a Tesla. So they're in a dominant market position, and I don't want to get into all the reasons why Tesla may not be competitive in manufacturing and all the money making. I get it. I've heard it 1,000 times. I don't care. They still are. They are the status.
There's
symbol.
gravitas there, right? There's just a gravitas that you're never really going to be able to completely erase if you're you're a Porsche, let's say, right? Because we know and we've seen that as others start to come into the EV space, the immediate yardstick is Tesla. And it's probably always going to be, and the price almost is a secondary thing, which still fascinates me, because as we see automakers come out, Mike, with more affordable ones, and maybe the Mustang Mach-E is going to be a really, really important one to watch, right? Because it's going to be a true kind of mass,
or the ID4.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, the ID4 I think is even a bigger,
Maybe so.
personally.
Right.
Yeah, I
Right.
mean, I think it's a big vehicle.
We've got a shot of the ID4 here somewhere. Yeah, there's the
Yeah, yeah.
Volkswagen ID4. Right.
I mean, it's good size, good range, good
Right.
price, you know,
Yeah.
Electrify America, online sales ordering. They basically have said, what's Tesla doing? We're going to do it. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. Well, and look, it's a package, really. We've seen that it's a package right now, that it's
Yeah,
going to have to be a good package. So
yeah,
that's going to be a fascinating vehicle launch to watch. The ID4 from Volkswagen and from Mustang, from Ford with the Mustang Mach-E. Okay, I think we're winding down here to the end of our time. Stephanie, I don't know if you were going to send us a prompt or not. I wish we had some more time to talk about this. Every year, the hype cycle, Mike, has for a lot of people in the industry, become an event really every year where it comes out. You see what things are on there. You see where they've moved, and sometimes there isn't a lot of movement, but we see new technologies come on. We see others go off, and it's become a real barometer, particularly for me, like a journalist who's been covering this for a long time in the industry. Always a fascinating thing to watch and to see how it moves and what you think about all these technologies that everybody talks about almost every day in this business. So
yeah.
thanks for doing this. Thanks for being with us today, Mike, and explaining it all. And thanks to the audience for your questions and everybody for joining in.
Thank you, Bill. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike. Do we have Stephanie as the the voice behind the curtain? Do you have anything you need to say before we sign off? No.
All
Okay.
right.
Okay.
Thanks a lot, everybody.
Thank you for sharing this with us today, Mike, and everyone who participated and joined in. Thank you.